Our next segment is a fireside chat. Please welcome Sally Allain and Gary Disbrow.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to wait till I see Gary in front of me. And first, want to say a big thank you to the Maryland Tech Council and having us together here as a collision of both in-person and a hybrid event. What a fantastic opportunity for all of us this year. And I see Gary. Good morning, Gary. It's great to see you.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining. So let me start first, especially to some great data that Marty just shared with the Milken report. I think it teed up some great points that we're going to talk about this morning together. But first, let me start with some formalities. Dr. Gary Disbrow, thanks for joining again. You are the director of the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, a component of the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response in the U.S. Health and Human Services, also known as BARDA. Dr. Disbrow joined BARDA in January 2007 and has held a variety of positions related to the advanced development and procurement of medical countermeasures against an array of threats to national security and public health. Prior to becoming the BARDA director, Dr. Disbrow served as acting BARDA director, Deputy Assistant Secretary of ASPR, and Medical Countermeasures Program Director. You have an amazing resume, but something I think that was really profound is your work in vaccines. And when you joined BARDA in 2007, you began working on the smallpox vaccine program. And you played a key role in awarding the first contract under Project BioShield, using authorities for advance payment and milestone payments provided under the 2006 Pandemic and All Hazards Preparedness Act. That smallpox vaccine was then licensed in 2019. Prior to joining BARDA, Dr. Disbrow was an assistant professor of oncology and pathology at Georgetown Medical Center, where he worked on HPV vaccines and therapeutics. And you've also worked at W.R. Grace, Kodak, and Gene Corps. Dr. Disbrow is a graduate of University of Rochester and Georgetown University. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here, Sally. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah. So before I get into the serious questions, I thought we'd start with a little bit of fun this morning. So a few quick fire fun questions for you, Gary. This AM, did you have coffee or tea?
An entire pot of coffee.
Yes. Like all of us getting back in person. In your inbox, I think this is a great East Coast versus West Coast question, but let's see. In your inbox this morning, was it 20 emails or 50?
Greater than 50.
Greater than 50. Sounds like someone on the West Coast waking up. Books or TV, last read or watched?
Yeah, so I have not had a lot of free time. I actually prefer, and I'm not much of a person to watch TV. If I have free time, I would prefer to be out walking around the city, perhaps grab a bite to eat or go on a hike.
I can't imagine why you've been so busy. Favorite local sports team?
Capitals. I would say the Redskins, but I'm a Giants fan, so that's not allowed.
And lastly, over this past year, how many panels have you been on?
I lost count, numerous. I wish I had more time to be on more panels to show all of the great work that the BARDA organization is doing. It's just a matter of bandwidth.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your incredible work and your service. So let's dive right in. So when we looked at, we think of the Maryland Biohealth Capital Region ecosystem. Advanced biomanufacturing in Maryland is thriving with a growing cell and gene therapy sector coupled with a world-leading vaccine industry. Thinking past COVID, how does BARDA see the region and engaging within the region?
Thanks, Sally. I mean, we have partnered with multiple companies in the DMV area. I mean, just some of those examples. I mean, you saw a list of companies from the previous presentation: Novavax, Emergent Biosolution, Biofactura, Cellfire, University of Maryland, and Flow, which is located in Richmond, Virginia, so not in the capital region, but definitely within the DMV. And so there are major universities in the area. I mean, obviously NIH, the largest research institute in the world, is located here. And we really want to reach out to the innovators and other companies that are interested in partnering with BARDA. A great opportunity for people who are interested in partnering with us is to attend BARDA Industry Day, which is being held November 3rd and 4th this year. And registration is open, and you can do that through the website. If you just Google phe.gov, you can find the BARDA webpage and register for that. And then also the establishment of JLABS DC, which is really, leading and catalyzing our investments in the local area for those small companies and companies that are entrepreneurial and have great ideas.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. And what Gary was talking and referring about is Johnson & Johnson Innovation opened JLABS at Washington, D.C. this past year. And we're going to talk a little bit about our public-private partnership we have in place with BARDA and a little bit about the companies that we are incubating together. Let me ask you first, Gary, on September 3rd, the Biden administration published the American Pandemic Preparedness, Transforming Our Capabilities Plan, and laid out within that plan an opportunity to seize the opportunity to ready ourselves for the biological threats on the horizon and for future pandemics. How has this changed the focus area for BARDA?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're all very excited about the American Pandemic Preparedness Plan, or APPP, I will call it for short. Pandemic preparedness has always been a cornerstone of the BARDA mission. We have been, investing in and preparing for pandemic influenza since our inception, and it's part of our mandate, as well as addressing chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats and emerging infectious diseases. I mean, BARDA has played an important role in responses to H1N1, Zika, Ebola multiple times, and now COVID-19. And as discussed in the APPP, we need to take the steps now to position ourselves to be able to respond quickly to future pandemics. I mean, many people are aware that we appreciate all of the supplemental funding that we've been provided. However, Congress, as we move away from, the perhaps peak of the pandemic, other crises may arise, and, they may see those as, the crisis that needs to be addressed. And so we're really hopeful that significant funding will come with this, so that as a U.S. government, we can prepare better for the next pandemic. And the goal is to develop a prototype vaccine, speaking specifically on vaccines, for the top 20 pathogens with pandemic potentials, and develop a prototype vaccine similar to what the Vaccine Research Center at the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Disease did for SARS and MERS, and then utilize that for SARS-CoV-2, and develop that, prototype vaccine, carry it through phase 1, phase 2 studies, support commercial scale manufacturing. So this is not just lab scale and clinical material, but to actually support commercial scale manufacturing, so that we can show that you can make this, for the entire U.S. population and potentially for global impact. Also working on therapeutics and antivirals for classes of viral families, as well as threat agnostic therapeutics, such as host-directed or host-targeted therapeutics, and then making sure that we have the infrastructure to be able to support this, so that we can more rapidly manufacture those vaccines. There are some very ambitious goals in the APPP, but to support that, we are going to have to make sure that we have at the ready significant infrastructure to manufacture the vaccines and the therapeutics and the diagnostics. And we also need to invest in innovative technologies, because to meet those ambitious goals, we are going to need to have innovative technologies brought to the forefront, many of which have been developed during the COVID response.
Thanks, Gary. And based on that new plan, are there areas that BARDA is moving away from now?
No, so we will continue to support all, in fiscal year 2021. We invested over $1.3 billion to support all of our partners across the chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threat space, as well as pandemic influenza. I see the APPP as expanding our emerging infectious disease mandate portfolio, as well as the funding that will support that. But we did invest over $41 billion over the past 18 months, which is greater than 20 times our typical investments for a fiscal year. So you can just, see that it's a tremendous amount of work, and we need to leverage everything that we've been able to put in place for this response and carry it forward so that we're better prepared in the future.
Yeah, that's an incredible amount. So when we think over the past year, how has BARDA sourcing strategies had to evolve and accelerate during this critical time?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we had to pivot very quickly, leverage existing partnerships that we had with industry and expanded to new partnerships. One of the key lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, and this is something that's been brought up in multiple tabletop exercises, is the immediacy of the need for funding. We utilized some of our advanced research and development funds, as well as our pandemic influenza funds, to look across our portfolio and identify partnerships that we had that could quickly be pivoted to develop either vaccines or therapeutics or diagnostics, and utilize those funds until we received the supplemental funding. And our first supplemental funding came on March 18th, 2020, and I will remember that day for the rest of my life. But also to increase coordination with our interagency partners under originally Operation Warp Speed and now under the Countermeasures Acceleration Group, or CAG. We hope that these increased collaborations will continue into the future, and it really is critical to make sure that we're not being redundant and that we're streamlined and have the best minds working across the federal government. And then, as I mentioned previously, the infrastructure to support this. So under the American Rescue Plan, the Defense Production Act funding that was provided to HHS, we are investing in industrial-based capacity expansion, our IBX efforts, and this includes supporting the expansion of capacity for raw materials, consumables, needles and syringes, fill finish capacity, as well as vials that are all necessary for these sterile injectables. And then for the early stage companies, through our Johnson & Johnson Innovation Blue Knight partnership, our accelerator program, we have 13 accelerators located across the United States. And all of this under our BARDA Division of Research, Innovation, and Ventures, and the new Ventures program is to invest in those innovative technologies that have, as I mentioned previously, been brought to the forefront during this pandemic. Community awareness. How do we know that something is going on in a community before those sentinel cases show up at the hospital, to diagnostics that need to be at home so that we can, do serial testing and make sure that everybody is safe and they can make a decision when they wake up in the morning. If they're, negative, they can go to work, and if they're positive, they may need to stay home or see their healthcare provider. So there's just an incredible amount of opportunities across pandemic preparedness, and we really look forward to working with new companies as well as our partners that we currently work with.
Yeah, and thank you, Gary. And something that you highlighted, and I think the importance of public-private partnerships. And our partnership. So Johnson & Johnson Innovation signed a unique partnership with BARDA back in 2019. And this was really a joint initiative dedicated to anticipating potential health threats, activating the global innovation community, and amplifying scientific and technology advancements. Blue Knight is our partnership. This was pre-pandemic, incredibly opportunistic at the time. And then in 2020, we really expanded that opportunity and selected a surge force of companies with an aim to respond specifically to COVID. Companies like Seven Hills Pharma, who's developing novel immunotherapeutics, Genome Biologics, who has their own GeniMaps computational platform, aimed to find the unknown links between FDA-approved drugs and disease. That's just two of the companies that are located globally. That portfolio has since expanded especially here as we opened Johnson & Johnson Innovation JLABS at Washington, D.C. We're incubating companies for Blue Knight. We're the hub in a hub and spoke model for Blue Knight. And just to give you a highlight of 2 companies we have here in the DMV area. So Congruence Medical Solutions, a Maryland company who's working on microliter dosing technologies, and a company called Acclinate that has actually moved up from Alabama to expand into this region. And they have a proprietary digital platform working on expanding diversity in clinical trials. A hugely opportunistic partnership that we can incubate early stage companies earlier than at which BARDA would typically partner, and really provide an infrastructure, mentorship, support system, resources around those companies to accelerate them faster. They have access to not only an infrastructure, but also high-end specialized equipment. So Gary, how do you feel about public and private organizations, and how can they complement one another to support and drive innovation for BARDA?
Yeah, it's, the BARDA model is the public-private partnership. I mean, that is the bread and butter of what we do. I hope that people feel that we do it better than any other, agency within the federal government. We are essentially a virtual pharmaceutical company for the federal government, and we do the development of medical countermeasures, vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics and devices through those public-private partnerships. And so the purpose of the goal of the investment in the partnership with JLABS, J&J JLABS, was to really be able to, invest smaller dollar amounts and in earlier technologies than BARDA would typically invest in. We are the Advanced Research and Development Authority, but we realized that for us to be successful in the future and for us to be able to address pandemics, we really need to invest in those innovative technologies. Again, I've mentioned previously, many of them have come to the forefront. And we have partnered now with JLABS as well as our accelerators, the 13 that we have located across the United States. And then we have the new partnership called DARPA Ventures, which was an authority that we were provided. But we are willing to partner with any size company, whether they're large pharmaceutical companies, mid-sized biotech companies, universities, or even small companies that just have an idea, of an innovative technology that they want to bring forward. And as you mentioned, what we do through these partnerships is bring our subject matter expertise in regulatory, manufacturing, non-clinical, clinical to the table to help those companies perhaps shape how they're going to move forward with those technologies, because it's really critical that they identify the technology and what gap they anticipate it filling, so that we can keep them focused. A lot of the small companies have very big ideas, which is fantastic. But to develop that product, you really need to have it focused. It's called critical path on what are the things that you need to do to develop that, to bring it to a commercial market. And so, we bring forward that expertise. The power of working with JLABS is that we have, now JLABS DC, where we have the local incubator, but the power of that is that they can collaborate and coordinate with people from all over the world that are in the JLABS consortium, as well as, through our accelerators that we have and Drive Network, as well as BARDA subject matter experts.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. And you mentioned, so these companies that are part of Blue Knight that we incubate here, not only in DC for Blue Knight, but also in New York and Toronto and San Diego. Just a few of the locations of the 13 Johnson & Johnson Innovation JLABS incubators. And you alluded to really tapping into an ecosystem where companies can cross-pollinate, access resources. And really importantly, which you also highlighted, is that mentorship. So how do we provide expertise either in specific therapeutic areas or clinical development, regulatory hurdles, to make sure these companies get through the valley of death, get through challenges, so that we really can get their science and technology closer to the clinic. So, Gary, let me ask you, what advice would you give early stage companies and entrepreneurs looking to pivot their technology addressing global threats?
Yeah, so I mentioned a few of these earlier, but solve a problem that matters for public health and matters to people. That will be your commercial market. Take the time to define the problem you're trying to solve and talk to the people for whom you're trying to benefit. So this is the end user engagement. We try to do this as much as we can with BARDA. We engage with professional societies such as the American Burn Association, burn surgeons, as well as IDSA if we're developing antimicrobial drugs, to really engage with your end user community so that you can understand what they're looking for, what gaps they potentially have, and how they would potentially utilize your technology. And then again, try and stay focused. Even though your technology could be considered a platform and could address multiple different threats and be very broad, is when you're starting out is to try and stay focused on one, knowing that if you could get that to commercialization, then it can be amplified, for additional diseases. And, again, reach out, talk to, your community partners that are in JLABS DC or through our venture partners or through Drive or through BARDA. And because we have experience, we have developed multiple products. BARDA is responsible for supporting 61 FDA approvals, clearances, or licensures. Many of these have been done under the animal rule, which is not the traditional pathway. So we are aware of some of the hurdles and challenges that you might be facing. But we are here to help. I mean, you mentioned the Valley of Death. It was always thought the Valley of Death was between, early research and development and commercialization. The Valley of Death for any company is when you don't have that next round of funding. So, just come in and, or speak with us. We are happy to assist where we can. And again, we're very excited about our new BARDA Ventures partnership, which actually would support potentially some of these partners through independent equity funding.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you about BARDA Ventures, the next question. So incredibly unique again, and certainly as we have at Johnson & Johnson Innovation, our venture arm, JJDC, and we're making even more investments very early into our JLABS companies. BARDA Drive has also recognized the need for investing earlier, and you recently formed BARDA Ventures. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's very unique for the federal government. This was an authority that BARDA was provided under the 21st Century Cures Act of 2016. And I know that, it was 5 years ago, but it actually took us, we wanted to do this right. It was a unique authority for us. There's only one other authority in the federal government that I know about. But what this does is the authority was called the Medical Countermeasure Innovation Partnership. It allows BARDA to partner with an outside entity, and we provide funds to that entity. Once the funds leave the federal government, they lose their government color of money, and that entity is able to invest on behalf of BARDA and make equity investments, meaning that they have equity positions within the company, which is not allowed for by the federal government. And so this is a unique partnership, and GHIC is the partner that was selected. And the reason for that is that they have what they call a double bottom line. They're interested in making return on investments, but they're also interested in bringing those products to commercialization and having an impact on public health. So some of the other venture capital firms that are out there are only concerned about, the bottom line of the return on investment, but GHIC has that double bottom line. So they not only want the return on investment, but the impact on public health. And so this is a very unique opportunity for us at BARDA to support this. We did over 2 years of market research to make sure that we were setting this up right. We talked with venture capital firms that were not interested in partnering with the federal government, but gave us some ideas of some of the pitfalls that may be coming in the future. And so we really took our time, and we're very excited. We just launched it in June of this year. and we hope to have our initial investments starting by the end of this calendar year.
Great, thank you. And we all know in this region, there's so many early stage companies, entrepreneurs that are doing incredibly well. And for them to be successful, we have to make those early investments and have more VC activity in this region. So as we talk about different regions, Gary, as BARDA works globally, how do you tailor your innovation sourcing and outreach? So we know certainly you're out there landscaping, you're putting out calls for applications. How do you tailor that outreach?
So it varies. I mean, again, through the accelerator network that we have, which again, we have 13 of those across the United States, we hold forums where we may ask them to do market research for us if we're interested in a particular area. Under JLABS, we just passed our 1-year anniversary partnership. I mean, obviously very excited about that. We had the inaugural Blue Light Symposium in December of 2020. We've organized more than 21 educational program events since 2020 and engaged with more than 3,200 innovators. So we stay focused on what our overall strategy is for the BARDA organization. But I think we provide those opportunities to companies. One of the opportunities that we provide is it's called the EASY BAA. It's easy, but it's the acronym is E, Z as in zebra, BAA. So it's a streamlined solicitation that allows smaller companies that don't want to deal with government bureaucracy to submit a 2,000-word abstract. We do a quick review to determine if we're interested or not in investing in it, and if we are, we invite them to submit a full proposal. Now, the EASY BAA, because it is a streamlined process, has limitations on the amount of funding that we can provide. It's capped at $750,000, and we often ask for a cost share of anywhere from 30 to 50% cost share. But it really streamlines that and provides companies who need access to that funding immediate access to those fundings. We can award contracts in as quickly as 9 days. On average, it's probably about 30 to 60 days. But it really is a mechanism that allows us to partner with companies and for companies to come in and engage with BARDA. And another way that we do this is through our Tech Watch program. So if you're a large company, a mid-sized company, or a small company, or somebody who just has an idea, you can register for a Tech Watch meeting and come in and have an honest and transparent discussion with the federal government, and particularly BARDA, but it cuts across all of the federal agencies. They will participate in those calls, and we will provide honest feedback. If it's a technology that we are interested in, if it's a technology that may not exactly fit for BARDA, we will try to provide touch points for other agencies who might have funding. Or we will provide honest feedback that you need to do additional work before you might be ready to further engage with BARDA. So we have multiple touch points for companies to come in and talk to us. We try to tailor some of our solicitations so that they're easier for smaller companies. And, my biggest message again is, BARDA Industry Day is November 3rd and 4th. It'll be virtual, so you can watch it at any time. Some of the sessions will be live. But that will give you an idea of the priorities for this coming fiscal year and the next several fiscal years for BARDA if you're interested in potentially partnering and you think I have a technology that would be a good fit.
And that is a great conference, incredibly robust conference of all your divisions participating with fantastic information. And as you alluded to, as you're out with your types of interface meetings, your Tech Watch meetings, you alluded to J&J Innovations, JLABS applications. So we have a constant rolling application opportunity, non-confidential. So we are looking to support and incubate companies that are strategically aligned to areas of need for BARDA under Blue Knight. And as companies apply, if it's not a fit or just need additional data, we will always provide feedback, additional information, guidance for all the companies that do apply as well. So, Gary, I'm going to shift to something I think is incredibly important for all of us at the moment in healthcare, and that's diversity, equity, and inclusion. We know the pandemic also highlighted health inequities. How is BARDA thinking about DEI?
Yeah, so I think, a lot has come to the forefront, of unequitable, distribution of medical countermeasures, and we are, improving on that. And some of the steps that we are taking is that within BARDA, we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative focused on increasing external and internal communications that address diversity and inclusion. We have a near-term focus on enhancing communications to underrepresented groups who are disproportionately affected by COVID-19 through engagement, education, and building trust. And I think, one of the pivotal things that was supported under COVID-19 was for the phase 3 trials to ensure that they were representative of the diversity that we have in the United States, and making sure that we had enrollment from all the cohorts from all of the diverse populations across the United States. And I think we were fairly successful in doing that, so that people also understand that if the vaccines, when they were authorized, or now with Pfizer's vaccine license, is that they could see that those cohorts in those phase 3 studies really did include people like them. I think that's very important for trust. And also, one of the groups that we're supporting under BARDA, as you mentioned, is Allain, that is moved from Alabama up to DC. And they have a program, an algorithm that allows for recruitment of individuals who are in underserved populations, so that they might participate in clinical trials. Because I think the most important thing is for people to be represented in those clinical trials, so that when the data is presented, again, that they can see that somebody like me participated in this trial. And we truly appreciate all of those volunteers for those phase 3 clinical trials.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. And I've also heard, talking with Dr. Sandeep Patel, who's the head of DRIVE, and yourself, also thinking on the pediatrics side. How is BARDA thinking about serving our young children and babies?
Yeah, so, BARDA from its inception in 2006 under the Pandemic and All Hazards Preparedness Act, our mandate is to develop medical countermeasures, again, vaccines, therapeutics, diagnostics, for all Americans, not just healthy adults, and that includes pediatrics. And pediatrics are not just small adults, they are different. And so, we really need to make sure that typically companies don't develop products for pediatric populations unless those diseases specifically affect pediatric populations, but we need to make sure that we are expanding our BLA and NDA indications to include pediatrics, or make sure that we have pediatric plans for those. And one of the other things that we're doing is we're doing challenge grants. So under DRIVE, we have a pediatric challenge to address, MIS-C, which is, severe COVID in pediatric populations. We're working with our partners across Department of Defense, as well as NCATS at NIH, to develop algorithms that might be able to predict for pediatric patients those that might progress to severe pediatric versus, potentially be okay. We're also working with the companies to make sure that for the therapeutics that they go now down below the age of 12, working, and hopefully the FDA will be reviewing that data to try and make those drugs available to pediatric populations below the age of 12, and also working with the vaccine companies to get the pediatric indications as well.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. And something that we're doing here in Washington, D.C., Johnson & Johnson Innovation is also partnered. We're anchored at Children's National's new Research and Innovation Campus in Northwest, really to also bring a light to the need for more pediatric research, technology, device innovation, because we know we're not where we need to be. And part of that is working with Children's Nationals teams and innovation, the National Capital Consortium of Pediatric Device Innovation, and of course, incubating companies that are focused on pediatric needs first. So thank you for highlighting that, the need for our children. So what are some of the steps maybe companies can take to identify diverse needs and improve access?
So again, I think you need to look at what your initial indication is going to be, but also look, as I mentioned earlier, about where the gaps are in healthcare. I think one of the things that came to the forefront, is telehealth, telemedicine, making sure, which is one way that we can provide healthcare access to all Americans, those that might be in a more rural setting versus an urban setting. And just to make sure that you're looking to the future of where you might be able to expand your technologies. Again, it's it's wide open. We call it end-to-end preparedness, from identifying something going on in a community all the way to making sure that we have vaccines, drugs, and diagnostics available for the individuals who need them, and is to make sure that it's accessible by all.
Thanks, Gary. And something I read over the weekend is actually a new partnership that you just put in place. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. So Partner Therapeutics, you just partnered and made that announcement, is a diagnostic approach to stratify sepsis patients. So clearly working on our health threats, responding to our health threats, and still trying to solve and find important responses for sepsis. Can you talk a little bit about BARDA's interest there?
Yeah, so, we have a saying, excuse me, in Kim Scarietta, who is our program manager for Solving Sepsis program, and the entire team, we say all roads lead to sepsis. And by that, we mean, while sepsis is not specifically a material threat determination for BARDA, a nuclear detonation is, and that could create, severe burns in thousands to hundreds of thousands of individuals. And those people would be more susceptible to sepsis because of bacterial infections. Same thing if it's not, the trauma from the nuclear blast, the ionizing radiation could deplete your immune response and your immune system, making you more susceptible to bacterial infections and sepsis. So, our interest in sepsis is that it is that underlying condition that is going to be secondary results or potentially primary results from the vast majority of threats that we have to address. And so it is critically important not only to address the pathogens that we are tasked with addressing through material threat determinations, but also the secondary pathologies that could occur from those, exposures. For COVID-19, the severe COVID-19 that people have is, the autoimmune dysregulation, and it's often sepsis with multi-organ dysfunction and failure. And so we have to address these underlying conditions, because if we only get people through that first stage, addressing the pathogen, there are so many secondary pathologies that come up, then we're truly not protecting people and making sure that we're doing everything we can to improve their health.
Thanks, Gary. And so BARDA's mission, responding to chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. Can you tell us what you're looking for when it comes to radiological and nuclear threats response?
Yeah, so there are, multiple subsyndromes that result from exposure to ionizing radiation, and then there's the trauma from the nuclear blast. So what we're actually trying to do, and we're doing this on the chemical side as well, because there are 20 different chemical agents for which we have, to address, is to address the pathologies that are associated with exposure to those agents versus the actual agents themselves. Because for most of this, they're so fast acting, it's going to happen instantaneously. that you really need to, be able to treat the resulting pathologies that come from that. And so, again, we're looking at the hematopoietic dysfunction that comes from exposure to ionizing radiation and the multiple subsyndromes that come from exposure to chemical agents as well. Where we can, repurposing drugs that are currently used in the market to treat pathologies that normally exist or exist in individuals. So acute respiratory distress syndrome, is something, there are multiple drugs to treat that. For chemical exposure, if you're exposed to chlorine or sulfur mustard gas and it gets into your lung, you would also get symptomology that is very similar to acute respiratory distress syndrome or COPD. And so we're looking at those currently available drugs to determine if we could repurpose those, because these are such fast-acting events. We want to repurpose already FDA-approved or licensed products where we can, so that if it does happen, the clinicians have experience using those drugs and administering those drugs, which would, lessen the complications of having to respond to those types of events.
Well, the mission at BARDA is incredibly broad. I can only imagine the work that you are all working on and developing. Before we wrap up here, Gary, any last thoughts you'd like to share with us?
So, I just want to thank you, Sally, and the entire J&J team. I mean, we had a great meeting a couple of weeks ago, as you mentioned, Children's Hospital up off Georgia Avenue. It's just very exciting to see what is going on in the DC region. I encourage people who are interested, you can go to our websites and get a link to the Blue Knight program if you're interested in being a partner there. And then again, I want to highlight the BARDA Industry Day, which will be coming up on November 3rd and 4th, where you can hear about some of our successes, some of our challenges, as well as our future priorities moving forward. And I just really want to thank the BARDA staff for all that they've done over these past 18 months. It has been a long 18 months, but they continue to support public health and each other. And I want to thank all of our partners out there, whether you're a partner in the COVID-19 response, ChemBio, RadNuke, or pandemic influenza. We appreciate your partnership. We always try to be frank and transparent with all of you, and we couldn't do this on our own. We truly do this as a partnership.
Oh, thank you, Gary. It's been a pleasure of ours to be partnered with BARDA in this unique partnership for Johnson & Johnson Innovation. We're thrilled to be able to have you and your team at our location often and engaging one-on-one with our entrepreneurs and early stage companies. And I think that talks to the importance of continually working with companies one-on-one so that we can really make them successful. We can continue to grow this region to the number 3rd slot. And we look forward to more opportunities moving forward. And as you highlighted, Gary, BARDA's Industry Day in November, and then also our next Blue Knight Symposium will be in the spring next year. So thank you, Gary. Thank you for your time, and thanks for everyone here.
Thanks, Sally. Appreciate it.
This year's Maryland Life Sciences Bioinnovation Conference is sponsored by Kite. Kite is a global biopharmaceutical company that is part of Gilead Sciences. Kite is based in Santa Monica, California, and has commercial manufacturing operations in North America and Europe. Kite's singular focus is cell therapy to treat and potentially cure cancer. As the cell therapy leader, Kite has more approved CAR-T indications to help more patients than any other company. MaxCyte. MaxCyte is an emerging global leader and trusted partner in the biotherapeutic, cell, and gene therapy industries. Headquartered in Gaithersburg, Maryland, we're proud to have supported the local life sciences community for over 2 decades. Our flow electroporation technology and next-generation expert platform helps accelerate, streamline, and improve drug development from research to commercialization. Now listed on NASDAQ with an IPO in July 2021, MaxCyte is attracting new investments to continue its commitment to enable and accelerate therapeutic programs. And Novavax. Novavax is proud to sponsor the 2021 Maryland Life Sciences Bioinnovation Conference. At Novavax, we are relentlessly committed to one goal: developing vaccines against the world's most urgent infectious disease threats. Our team of experts is working in partnership with leading organizations from around the globe to advance our pipeline, including our COVID-19 and seasonal influenza vaccine candidates. For more information about our efforts to combat the pandemic and to see our latest career opportunities, please visit Novavax.com. We'd like to thank these and all of our sponsors for their support of this year's Maryland Life Sciences Bioinnovation Conference.